Hey everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Mayor's Table. We're going to be talking about economic development. We'll be talking railroad, broadband, growers market, and with me is the CEO of Four Corners Economic Development, Arvin Trujillo, and Chairperson Steve Gray. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett. Thank you for joining us today for this Mayor's Table episode. Today we're talking about Four Corners Economic Development with the CEO of Four Corners Economic Development, Arvin Trujillo. Thanks for joining me.
Sure thing, Mayor. Glad to be here.
And Chairperson Steve Gray with Four Corners Economic Development. Steve, thanks for being here.
You bet.
So economic development's a topic that I think is on the minds of a lot of not just people in the Four Corners area, but probably across the United States, especially right now in the middle of a pandemic. So I thought it was probably pertinent to have a conversation. Arvin, you've been the CEO now with Four Corners Economic Development since 2019.
Yes.
Right?
That's
and then
correct.
Steve, you come on as the chairperson here. Is it this year that you become the chairperson?
Yes.
All right. So we got some fresh faces and fresh ideas and a fresh outlook on kind of what we're looking at for a regional component for economic development. I thought, you know what, it'd be great to get our viewers and the people in our community an update. So thanks for being here.
Sure. Oh, appreciate it.
Yeah. Arvin, tell us a little bit about your background and why you're interested in becoming the CEO of an organization that's grown over the years and, well, really changed. I don't know if it's grown necessarily, but it certainly has changed. And what is your interest in that?
Well, by education, Mayor, I'm a mining engineer. When I finished up at Penn State, I came back. I worked up in the Powder River Basin up in Wyoming for about 4 years. After that, I was hired by BHP to come back down. I worked at all three mining operations here with BHP. From there, I was then asked to join then President Kelsey Begay's administration. So I headed up the Division of Natural Resources for the Navajo Nation, both under President Kelsey Begay and President Joe Shirley. I was there for a little over 11 years. And then from there, I then took a position with Arizona Public Service Company, being their government relations manager at the Four Corners Power Plant. And from there, I got involved with Farmington. I'm from this area, went to high school at Kirtland, graduated there back in '75, and really have had an interest in this area. This is home to me. And so working with Arizona Public Service Company, I got involved with the Future Forum initiative. And that initiative was to bring the area together, the region together, looking at economic development. Because I remember economic development in this region all the decades, back when even the Navajo Nation still had the Navajo Economic Office, ONEO. And so again, those things there really helped me focus and look at what are the possibilities here. And what really got my interest going is what was our plan B. You know as well as everybody else, the power plants are beginning to shut down. And with that, we'll go to mines. Our oil and gas industry is right now in an area of flux, as we see transitioning happening with the extractive energy area. So again, it comes back to what's our plan B? What's going to happen? Should, in the worst case scenario, I know we are all working hard with San Juan Generating Station, but what happens if that should shut down? Right now, Four Corners is also planning on shutting down by 2031. What's the plan after that?
Sure.
And so again, we're looking at that. And that's what really has been driving me at this point. And that's why when the opportunity came for this position with Forset, I was working for Arizona Public Service Company. I said, I think I can do something. And so that's where I came on board back in 2019.
Well, Arvin, you said some really critical things there, and I appreciate you giving us that background. One of the things that stood out to me is you said the word, this is home. This is home, and that's meaningful because this is, when it's your home, you want to take care of it.
Yes.
And you want to make it a nice place, and you want to make it so that it's not just about you, it's about your family that's there, it's your friends that are there, and it's about community. And I thought that was a real key component. This is home. And when economic development comes into the conversation, that plan B that we're talking about is really it's plan B, plan C, plan D, and we're throwing a lot of things in a lot of different areas to say we have a lot to offer here. The plan A has been consistent for us for a long time. Natural resources has sustained this community and will continue to. I don't think we can just forego the fact that we have such an amazing array of those natural resources here. We've just got to find other ways to utilize them than maybe what we have historically, and the companies that have operated here will have to find new ways to make money and provide jobs for those resources. Which, Steve, this is, I mean, perfect for where you have just come before coming over to the Four Corners Economic Development Team. Kind of give us a little bit of your background as well.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I also come from the Navajo Nation. I come from a community about 2 hours west of here called Kayenta. So really nice area, growing up there. And one of the things that I always tell people, a lot of people is, I'm just a res boy, I like to tell them that, a lot of people, because when they look at what you've done over time in your career, they kind of think you've always done that. And I don't. I grew up on the reservation, herding sheep, just like a lot of other young kids. Climbed all those mesas and mountains out there in that area. But real rich life, I spent the first couple of my years living in the Hogan out there in Kayenta. So it was a very rich, enriching life, when you grew up like that. My journey was very unique, and I tell people I've been very blessed, because I was fortunate enough to start college after I got out of high school. I worked a little bit, and then I decided I want to go back into college. And so I finished up at Northern Arizona University at their College of Engineering, just like Arvin said here. So we got two engineers, on the crew here. But I worked several jobs, when I was done. Primarily, I've been mostly in the energy field. Of course, most of my career took me to one of the national labs. I spent 27 years of my career with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They're just like Los Alamos, Sandia, but we're based out of San Francisco in the Bay Area there. So I was very fortunate to start with them and to have a good career with them. Out of that, 3 of those years I spent in Washington, D.C. on assignment on the Secretary of Energy staff. After I got done with that, though, I participated. The nation asked me if I wanted to help them with a company that was going away, BHP Billiton, actually one of Arvin's former employer, they were leaving. And the nation didn't want to lose the good jobs here at Navajo Mine and at Four Corners Power Plant. So they pulled a number of us together and said, we need to start a company. And we need to get it going, and we need to make a purchase. And so that company was Navajo Transitional Energy Company. So I served on that board, as it got started. And then I transitioned over to it, as staff. And then at the beginning of this year, I stepped away from Intech, and I decided, I wanted to go and do other things, And so right now, one of the things I am doing is, I am chairing the Four Corners Economic Development Group.
So what I get out of this conversation, just with you two gentlemen here today, is the extensive experience in service and in working in this area, but certainly the power of your energy backgrounds. And interesting, BHP is a part of both of your stories. BHP is the reason I moved to Farmington in the early 90s, because my stepfather worked out at Navajo Mine. So it's kind of funny how all this gets tied together. But when you have a large energy economy, I kind of find that there's a lot of those connecting points. So, but Arvin, beyond energy and that Plan B and that Plan C and those things, and our viewers have seen some of our interviews with Warren Unsecker and things that we're doing here in Farmington for economic development. working around outdoor recreation, retirement, tourism. We're talking on a countywide basis, kind of those broader, bigger components of attracting large companies, growing jobs, and looking at, in my opinion, some large infrastructure projects that are going to propel this community forward for a century or more, right?
Yes.
And particularly, and I want to give you some time to kind of talk about, you've mentioned that this is an area where you see it as a broader scope of economic development. But I'm going to give you a chance. I want you to talk a little bit about the strategic plan right now for Four Corners economic development, and we'll talk a bit about the projects that are in your scope.
Mayor, you brought up a good point. One of the things, again, San Juan Economic Development Services, which is what Forsyth grew out of, was a group that really focused on Farmington and looked at, okay, how do we begin to support businesses locally? And how do we partner with different other organizations locally to begin to support industry and businesses here in the general Farmington area? They kind of outreached, I remember when I was with BHP and with Arizona Public Service Company, we did work with SJEDs on different projects. But again, there began to, the people began to see the need for a more regional effort, looking at economic development. We have a number of very successful communities here in this Four Corners region, but we haven't really been able to focus our energies in one direction. And so because of that, we've been trying hard, each of us have been trying very hard to develop their economic base and develop their economy. But it seems like we end up stepping on each other's toes as we go along. What Forsyth is focused on now with our strategic plan is, how do we begin to look at partnerships? How do we bring partners together? How do we find common ground so that we can tackle different issues or look at different projects, and in that manner enhance our economic stability and bring diverse industry, diverse businesses back to this general area? That's our focus. That's what our strategic plan is all about. The power with this strategic plan is that it wasn't just a group of people in the back room putting this stuff together. We had community involved in this. Community members came in. We worked this process. It took us a good 7-8 months to get this all put together with the input that we were receiving from core stakeholders throughout the region here. We were able to look at developing our mission, looking at partnerships, looking at how do we develop a diverse, vibrant economy through partnerships. And then how do we look at the different goal areas? When we established 5 goal areas, one was looking at partnerships. How do we develop those partnerships amongst ourselves within San Juan County and with the region here? Southwest Colorado, the Navajo Nation, the Ute Mountain Utes. The thing that I keep talking to people about is when I first was doing initial interviews in the area, a lot of the people were stressing the fact that they needed capital. We were looking for working capital.
Sure.
And I said, did you know that you're surrounded by $7 billion of possible venture capital? And people will look at me puzzled. What? I said, the Ute Mountain Utes, they have $3 billion in a growth fund there. The Navajo Nation has $2 billion in a permanent fund. I said, the Lagunas, at this point, I don't know where they're at now. They were reaching towards $1 billion with their money. I said, we have dollars that are available within the region. We just haven't learned how to tap into those dollars. And look at the partnerships with tribes. So again, partnerships is important, organizational development. How do we begin to structure ourselves so that we are a regional force in the area? How do we look at business recruitment, retention, expansion? How do we look at workforce development and capacity building? And more importantly, how do we look at data? And when I say data, I'm looking at data focused on the Four Corners area. Yes, we get data here, but it's in concert with what's happening in the rest of New Mexico. But think about it. Who are our economic partners here? Where do we go shopping?
Sure.
A lot of times, yes, we do go to Albuquerque, but more than often we go to Durango. We go to Cortez.
Or we shop here.
Or we shop here. They shop. They shop down
right,
here.
Right.
And again, what I'm wanting to stress here is that we tend to hold within our own group here. You know, Steve's from Kienta. Those people come from Kienta here.
Absolutely.
And so again, looking at that, we want to begin to generate data that looks at that aspect.
Right.
And says, how do we begin to describe ourselves from a Four Corners perspective?
Sure. Well, I think Arvin, you bring up a great point. One of the components that we have an issue with sometimes is the metropolitan statistical area that's known as Farmington. And it's interesting because that metropolitan statistical area has this line on the north side of us that cuts off at the state of New Mexico and doesn't include those southwestern communities, Colorado communities, that are really a part of this regional economic engine, so to speak. I mean, this is the greater area. I think there's 15,000 vehicles a day that come from Durango into Farmington for work, and there's like 5,000 that go from Farmington to Durango. But that doesn't encompass all the people traveling back and forth for shopping and dining and outdoor recreation and all the
Even
different
employment.
things that we do, and employment. So I think that is a really important key to the mission of Four Corners Economic Development, and I'm glad that is a focus on the goal. Steve, I know you obviously agree with that. As
Yeah.
chairman, you've helped formulate this strategy. What do you think some keys are going to be to kind of bring southwestern Colorado and northeastern Arizona and everybody together here, and even, I guess, southeastern Utah?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think, again, it's kind of like what Arvin said, we really got to focus on letting those customers out there know who we are first. I think that's really important. And it's our footprint right now is very big. But oftentimes I think people don't fully see that. And what is our footprint? It's in this region, it's in the county, but it's also in the Four Corners area. That's really what we do. We're a very diverse community. We have, as was just described, there's a lot of people that come and go, into this region right here, into San Juan County. And what we've got to do is really focus on all of that and reaching out to them and letting them know, just like embracing them, that we're all in this together. And especially in these trying economic times, it's more important than ever to really get out there and to let everyone know we're in this together.
Sure.
We can make it work. Prior to COVID-19, the whole region was bustling. It was good. The unemployment numbers. And then it hit. And so we now have to look at that. We have to take that into account of how do we move this economy back to where it was at. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of smart people, there's a lot of successful businesses throughout the whole region, and a lot of them have answers.
Right.
And what we need to do is hear from them. We need to say, what is your thoughts on this? What are you seeing in this sector? And that's really, as a board, that's one of the things that we always have to look at, is take that big picture into account. Just like Arvin described, it's beyond our little area, because we're such a big regional hub for the Four Corners, and I think that's really important.
I think it is. It's recognizing the different resources that each section, kind of this broader regional economy, the resources that each one can offer one another, and how do we tap into those things so that we're using local food to serve our local communities, and how do we utilize that to come together for joint ventures. The railroad project is something I want to kind of give you an opportunity to speak about. But you've got to have those stakeholders from those communities buy in. Mm-hmm. And I know that La Plata County's Economic Development Alliance group, we're a component of that now. Am I right?
Yes.
Forset and the city of Farmington, I believe, sit on those calls, and vice versa. Obviously, on our board, we want to have those members. That way, we're sharing information. We're collaborating, but we're recognizing that what we're trying to do is fill the gaps and really glue everything together. One of the things we talked about in a meeting that we had was the need for the general public, just the general individual, to recognize that there may be borders that exist on a map between us, but those are really invisible.
Yeah.
And the things that affect one community have a great impact on another community. For example, the closing of power plants and mines here in northeastern Arizona and northwestern New Mexico has a great impact on the amount of money that can be spent on tourism, food, and things of that in southern Colorado, where tourism is such a big component. Those things, they impact one another. So how do we spend the time and make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and working with those folks in a hand-in-hand component, not in a disparaging way, not in trying to beat each other out to something, but to say, hey, we know that if it's good for you, it's going to be good for us.
That's right.
So how can we promote it and make it happen? And I think that's really one of the great components of a regional approach, so I appreciate that. But Arvin, a lot of people will talk about railroad. Railroad's been talked about for decades. If you looked at a map of New Mexico, many people have heard me say this before, if you looked at the transportation lines, northwest New Mexico is bald. It's a lot like me. It's bald. There's nothing up here. There's no rail lines. We don't have a Greyhound stop running through rural areas. It only runs on interstates, so you don't have a bus line. The airport, we lost commercial service a couple years ago, which we're obviously close to getting back here. But railroad, when there's goods and services that can be provided along that kind of affordable means of mass transportation, I think that's got a lot of play here, and especially as we look at Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. So speak to kind of how this relationship has now been formed and is a little bit more solid base, in my opinion, than maybe where we've been before with the interest of the Navajo Nation.
Mayor, you bring up a good point looking at the partnerships, and that's what I've learned in my career. As you bring these partners together, you're able to develop strategies whereby you can do these large infrastructure changes. I was a part of working with the state of New Mexico when I was with the Navajo Nation in getting 491 expanded to a 4-lane highway, in getting 550 expanded. But it was through a partnership we were able to get that done. It was through a partnership with the state of New Mexico and the Ute tribe, as well as the Navajo Nation and the Apaches, to get the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project in place so that we can now they're building the project now to bring water in. So again, what we're looking at is how do we develop those necessary partnerships in order to bring necessary infrastructure development here in the region. That's one thing that we've been able to do with the railroad project. We've developed an MOU with the Navajo Nation, between the Navajo Nation and San Juan County. And there we've committed, both of these government entities have committed to bringing rail to San Juan County and to be looking at other opportunities for both economic and community development that would enhance both areas, both the Navajo Nation as well as San Juan County. And so building on that aspect, what we've been able to do is we begin to advance the effort. Now we're not having arguments on where the route's going to be or where the transloading location will be or none of this. We're coming together now talking about here's the general plan. What will it take to get the right-of-way, the environmental clearances, and get some real planning done where we can develop a prospectus that we can take to investors out there to say, here's what it's going to take to build this railroad. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're building towards. We have what we call an MOU team in place that is comprised of folks from the Navajo Nation, Forsyth, San Juan County, all working together to try to get all of these pieces in place for the eventual opportunity to sell this idea to those outside the area.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, a lot of people will ask, what are you going to send down? What are you going to send down the rail line from this region? And a lot of times when that question is asked, it's not just about what may exist today that we send down that rail line, but it's what it can exist tomorrow that can utilize that rail line. And petrochemical was one of those conversations that we had, because the petrochemical companies, one of the major components of making their product is natural gas. And we have some of the cheapest natural gas in the world right here in the San Juan Basin, but we don't have a cheap way of sending it out of here. Same question comes into a pipeline, a natural gas pipeline that would feed our natural gas to the coast of Mexico. well, we don't have that pipeline, but rail could help provide a little bit of that more affordable transportation that we're missing now. And so there's something there. But then you can tie in the products being grown at Nappy. You can tie in the manufacturing that's happening with companies like Pesco.
Raytheon.
And Raytheon, which is, I saw the stock market this past week. Raytheon's doing very well.
Yes.
They've had some good reports come out. So, and these are all local companies and organizations that can utilize that rail and provide long-term, stable, high-paying jobs.
Yeah.
Right? When we talk about the need for economic development, I get stuck on the idea that it's those high-paying jobs that create all the other jobs and services below it. Attracting those is key to us. Steve, what are your thoughts in regards to rail and that that kind of mindset?
Yes, Mayor. I think that you both have hit right on it, and that's one of the things that we look at. I'll let Arvin expand a little bit on other products that we're thinking about, like that could come out of the petrochemical plant. But what I do want to say is, when you ask the question about why is it different now? Why is it a little bit different? I think one of the reason is, and I give credit to Arvin for this, you have to go out and you have to talk with the public. You have to tell the people, this is what we're thinking about, okay? You have to talk to the people that are in leadership roles, and you have to let them see what the benefit is to them. And so when you start to do that, that's what I mean, the region becomes much more bigger. So you start to say, your products as far as Cortez, your products as far as Durango, they also can use this. And then obviously the Navajo Nation, as well. And so then people start thinking more bigger and saying, okay, this is going to really help us, if we start to do that. And I think that's really important as we look at all kind of projects, all kind of economic development projects that we could embark on. And they are starting to come. And so as we look at them, we also have to make sure, is this what the people think about? What's their input on that? And I think as we do that more and more, they gain momentum.
Sure.
And that's what we're seeing right now. They're starting to gain momentum. Even in this trying period that we're in, that everybody in the country's, suffering from, we realize that if we pick and select carefully, we are going to get those big economic development projects that will benefit the region.
I agree. Railroad is one of those things that I think it's a huge investment up front to do, as you said, to accomplish the right of way, to get the rail built, to get the transportation, to get all those things worked into that. That's a big deal. And it takes private investment as much as it takes public investment, because you got to have a company run the trains. Broadband is another one of those components when we're talking about how we grow here locally. Communication is key. Having reliable broadband is going to be important when you're talking about people who need to, work in neutral locations. There's so many folks who can now work anywhere in the world for companies located anywhere in the world. You don't need to be in that same city, in that same office. And I think what you've mentioned, Steve, in regards to the impacts of COVID, is that now people have recognized, do I really need to have an office building and pay rent and have all that stuff built into it when I could have people at home on their computers tied to my network, and it saves me all that additional overhead, and you can live in Four Corners, USA, as I like to call our home here. You can live in Four Corners, USA, mountain bike in the evenings, and then work your job in the daytime from the luxury of, looking at the mesas and La Plata Mountains. I mean, it's gorgeous. But you got to have good broadband for that. If kids are going to be at home learning and not in school, then you're going to need to have good broadband. So talk to us a little bit about the broadband project and where we're at with it right now.
Well, again, the goal here is looking at infrastructure and how do we begin to develop that. One of the keys that we've been able to achieve with the broadband aspect is developing that partnership with Southwest Colorado. Southwest Colorado Council of Governments has been working on a fiber optic line that would connect Durango to Cortez and then come down to the state line on both sides. through our partnership and discussions with them, we said, why don't you come on into our area and let's look at a loop? After a number of discussions with that, we went before the city council, Farmington City Council, and also San Juan County Commission, requesting seed money to look at an engineering study to look at a loop that would connect Durango to Cortez, come south to Shiprock, to Farmington, back up to Aztec, and then back up to Durango. So you would have a fiber optic loop developed in that, connecting all those municipalities. The engineering study has been done. We're awaiting their final report so that we can begin to move forward with that. Now, along with that aspect, Colorado is looking at how they can connect Dove Creek, Colorado with Monticello, Utah. If you can get those two cities connected from Colorado to Utah, that gives us access to the Utah broadband network, which will take us all the way into Salt Lake City. We already have connections into Albuquerque through the P&M line that comes down from Albuquerque into the region. Now you connect those two lines to this loop. Now we have redundancy going to Salt Lake City. We have redundancy going to Albuquerque. And then we can begin to build out in San Juan County and Southwest Colorado with further development on our middle mile and eventually our last mile. So we can get connection, fast connection here in the general San Juan County area. Mm. So we're not limited by just saying, well, are you in an area where you have cable? Because that's as far as broadband goes.
Sure.
I went through those difficulties living in Fruitland.
Yep.
To the point to where high-speed broadband was 3 houses away from me, and I couldn't get access.
Not without paying for it.
Not without paying for it.
You got to build it, and they will come.
And then again, finally, they were able to expand their services. So now I've got high-speed broadband available. But it took a few years to get that done. We're wanting to expand it out here and look at the chapters also. And how do we begin to do that? So we've made inroads there with the rail. We've moved forward. We've got an agreement in place. We're looking at a bill grant to come in for $2 million in partnership with the Navajo Nation to get that done. We're looking with Southwest Colorado to get this loop in place, to get our middle mile planning done, and at that point to take advantage of funding that will become available looking at broadband development in rural regions. That's our ultimate goal, is to get to that point so that we can take advantage and build our systems out, because that's what it's going to take for us to be able to diversify our economy.
No doubt.
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure is key. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's a really good update on that broadband component. The city of Farmington's doing a dark fiber study, because we have some of that accessibility here, and determining whether or not that's something the game we want to get into, and providing that type of service and selling that access to that line. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of tape wrapped around that idea that we're going to have to cut through to get to. But it's good to at least know what you have and what's available, and if people are interested in investing in it, then it may be something that takes off. The final project, the final thing I want to make sure we touch on in today's episode, because I'd love to have you guys back again. I think it'd be good to provide these kind of updates as we see, the success of these projects. And I say success of these projects because I think there's some really smart, intelligent people that are behind these things, and the collaborative efforts that you're putting forth, and frankly, the need. A lot of economic development is driven by need.
Yep.
And I think we've seen that here locally as we've seen high-paying jobs leave this area. The need for us to find new ways to attract businesses and people grows more every day. So I look forward to having you back. But the final project I want to make sure we hit on today is the Northwest New Mexico Growers Market Alliance. I believe that you guys agreed to be the fiscal agent for that organization. But can you tell us a little bit about what they're doing?
Yes. Here in San Juan County, as many people are aware, there are a number of farmers markets all across San Juan County. Those farmers markets help support our small farms, our farmers and our business members who have farms and produce that are being harvested at the end of every year. What we're doing right now is we're partnering with the food hub, and we're looking at building an alliance that would connect all these farmers markets within San Juan County into what we're calling the Northwest New Mexico Growers Market Alliance. And FORSED is going to be the fiscal agent for that organization and help them begin to build that organization. And the idea here is, how do we help support our local farmers? How do we provide the necessary training, especially in this current atmosphere with COVID? How do we educate people? Because people are still hampered by the stigmatism of the Gold Keen mine spill.
Sure.
And looking at, is the food safe and et cetera? How do we get training? How do we get testing done so that people will become confident in the food that's produced here in the San Juan County region? We get the necessary training to our vendors so that they're able to assist customers. More importantly, get training to them so that they can take advantage of food alternative ways of paying for that food through the SNAP program or through WIC or through a number of these other programs. How do we help train our vendors so that if people don't have cash, but they have these federal or state assisted programs in place, how can they do that? So they can also benefit from buying good produce from San Juan County here. And so again, we're really excited about this piece. We're working with the Food Hub. We're going to be working on getting a commercial kitchen developed with partnership here with Farmington.
Right.
And so again, all of that is looking at food. We're also looking at how do we best partner with NAPI to help build and help stabilize this whole overall effort. So again, there are partnerships that are beginning to come together to see how do we look at food in the agricultural base as one aspect for this whole community here. We're really excited about this, Mayor, because again, it's seeing how we can partner. And again, it's that aspect of getting our community members involved in what we're doing. That came about because we had individuals who were involved in the farmers market and the food market here came back with that idea saying, this is what we want to do. We then got our heads together and began to figure out, is this a good way? Can we help support this effort? So again, that comes back to how we as partners can come together and we find common ground. We can make things happen where before people say, well, I don't know, we can, or we can't, or that's never been done.
Sure.
I've been through enough of those, that's never been done. Well, let's go make it happen and to show people that it can be done. So that's I really am excited about that program.
Steve, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I wanted to just expand on a little bit of that because on the broadband, you know, we're going to have what I call the new norm, and that's going to affect everybody. Part of that norm is just exactly what you all were describing about the need for better communication. Aside from the 5 big communities in San Juan County, the rest of the county is pretty rural. And communication and telecommunication is very important. And I think, you know, you look at how our kids are going to be taught, you know, from here on out. You look at how the workforce is going to look from here on out. And so it's a lot of it's going to stem around telecommunications. And so I think that's one area we've got to really be aware of. The other one is the medical side. With COVID, again, we have seen what it can do and our shortfalls in medical, especially in the rural areas. And so, but even in healthcare workers, that workforce, that is one sector that is going to grow.
No doubt.
And we really should start taking a look at that and seeing how we can become a regional player. We've got 2 big hospitals in this region, but you know, little clinics are going to become very vital and important. But it's really those healthcare workers that are going to continue to grow. So we have to be able to look across the spectrum and make sure we're seeing these things and looking and capitalizing on them. So I wanted to mention that as well, Mayor.
Well, technology is going to be important for healthcare and for a lot of industries, and the continued improvements and efficiencies in that. Because the one thing that I've understood during this pandemic, from the hospital standpoint, is the number one resource that we're missing is not PPE, it's not testing kits, it's not IC, it's not ventilators, it's people.
Yeah.
People people in the hospitals, the nurses, the doctors, everybody who's involved in those processes. We need more individuals willing to go into that workforce. And when I was writing down notes here, is education is so important in all of these things that we've been talking about. And right now, today, we're providing an education to people who may be interested in getting involved in some of these initiatives that we've been talking about. And so I want to make sure that we utilize this moment to say, if people are watching this and they're interested in what Forset is doing, how can they get involved in it?
What they can do, Mayor, is we have a website, www.cornersed.com. They can go to our website, or they can email me. It's Trujillo at, again, cornersed.com. That's my email.
Okay.
Or they can give me a call at area code 505-566-3702. Those are ways that you can contact us. We're really looking at community members, business members, to become involved with Forset, because it's with your assistance and your help that we can figure out exactly what we need to be focusing our efforts on as we look not only at these big picture items, but how do we look at business retention and expansion? How do we look at supporting our businesses, and how do we look at partnering with the chamber and with the city governments and with the EDOs that are in place? Because the idea here is Forset does not want to duplicate efforts. We want to supplement and expand efforts so that we can achieve the different goals that we all have in terms of community, economic, and social improvement here in this area. And again, as I talk about that, this is home to me. Mm-hmm. I grew up here. I grew up at the Nanazad boarding school. That's where my parents worked. Like I said, I went to school through the Kirtland system from kindergarten all the way to high school, and graduated from there, and had the fortunate opportunity to come back and work in the area. Now I'm living in the area. And again, one day I would like to have businesses here so that my kids can come back. I worked really hard to make sure that my kids were educated and got all the opportunities available to them in terms of education. It's great. They all graduated from college, and they're out on their own. Except now I've got one in Baltimore, Maryland. I got another one in Denver, Colorado, and I got another one in Portland, Oregon. I would love to have them here.
They're in all the hot spots. Arvin, I mean, you just read off a map of the United States, and I went, wow. They're in the middle of a lot of things right now. But that's a great point. The brain drain is a real issue in areas where you're losing those economic-based jobs that have been the reason that people came here, the reason that ConocoPhillips ran engineers through here, the reason BHP ran all their workforce through here. I mean, we were a corporate hub for so many big companies that paid people well. And we were working on those components, and a lot of what we talked here today is driven in that direction. And I appreciate the efforts that you're putting in. Four Corners Economic Development, you don't have a giant workforce that's out there doing these things. It takes donations and investment from individual companies and individuals themselves to keep those things going, as well as the county and the cities. So thank you for what you're doing there. Steve, any final words that you have today?
No, I think you hit right on it. In closing, what makes Four Corners Economic Development are the businesses. And we welcome everyone, of the businesses. We want them to be part of Forset, because together we're going to make it. We're going to turn this ship. And I think it's really important that we, they all understand that we're all in this together.
Sure.
And we welcome them. We welcome their thoughts, their ideas, and we want to see how we could grow the region. So I just want to close with saying that.
Very good, Steve. Arvin, anything else there?
No, sir. I think I've said quite a bit, but I'll be more than happy to come back at some point and give you an update on where things are at.
I think that'd be good. I think the people would enjoy it. And this is a good episode. I think there's a lot of good information there that people have, and giving them an ability to reach out if they have any questions, if they're interested in getting involved. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here today.
Sure.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Mayor's Table. Economic development is critical. Dollars spent today equals more dollars coming in tomorrow. It's not just about dollars, right? The economy makes so many things work and work better. And we just appreciate your involvement here. Stay engaged here with the Mayor's Table, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.